Good morning, everyone. So today you and I are going to talk about web application infrastructure. No. Actually, not infrastructure, server structure, and the architecture that we call MVC. And I'm going to share a few thoughts on that architecture. So let's get into it. So for those of you who don't know what MVC is, it stands for Model View Controller, and it is hands down the most popular architecture for a web server, and for basically for an API as well. It's so popular, in fact, that I would say that it almost goes without saying that you know this architecture whenever you go out into the workforce. It is this is a big one, guys. So if you have no idea what I'm saying when I say MVC, go and look that up, because that's how important it is. It is a prerequisite to work in a professional company. It's up there with object-oriented programming. You need to know this stuff. Really, you need to know this stuff. So let's define it first and foremost. Model basically means that you have a model of some sort, which usually represents the different data structures that you need in order to provide your value. So let's say that in the context of a web shop, for example, a model would be something like a product, a user, or a customer, maybe, because there's usually a few more users out there than just your customer. But a product and a user and a cart, maybe, like it kind of depends. But there are these natural data structures, and the model part of your application is just the place where you keep all of the code that is going to talk to the database. In other words, let's say that you have a class that is called products, or usually these go by something like a DAO, a database access object of some sort. That's what the general term for it usually is, anyhow. So that's where you put all the code, or rather conceptually, that's where all the code lives that is going to talk to the database. So it's responsible for, and only responsible for, saving, updating, removing, deleting, like all of this stuff. That's all it's supposed to be doing. And then you have the view layer, or the view part of MVC. And so the view is, many people mistake the view for being like something that necessarily needs to be HTML, for example, but it's actually not true. The view is basically the code, or the part of this MVC structure, which is responsible to show things to whoever is requesting information from your system. So let's say that you're visiting a web page. Now the view would be a render, say PHP, for example. So what would happen is that the request is going to come in. It's going to hit your controllers, or a controller endpoint, that is then going to go to the database, use the model to get data from the database, and then it's going to get the view file, the rendered file that you want to display to the user, put all of that data in that PHP file that's going to be converted into an HTML file, or HTML, with all the information in the places in the template. And then that template is going to go to the client, or the person asking for your web page. And that's the view part of it all. So the idea is that the view is only responsible for showing data to the user. That's all it's supposed to be doing. It used to be the case that the view was this messed up thing where you put a bunch of logic, and this is especially true in old PHP styles of working, where like you would have database access in the HTML and like all of this stuff. We've moved past that now. This is not how it's done anymore. What you do is that you let the model take care of getting data, and the view just takes whatever data it needs in order to show itself to the user or to the client. But it can also be that the view may not necessarily be a PHP file that then gets converted into an HTML file. It could also be that it's JSON. Let's say that you have just a plain old API. Then what would happen is that you would have a function, maybe, or it could also be a template file as well. In PHP you can do that, and you would simply the view would, in this case, not be an HTML file or a PHP file that gets converted into an HTML file. It would just be a JSON file. It could be an XML file. Don't make this mental mistake. Don't think that the view is always going to be an HTML file, because it's not. It could be a JSON file, it could be XML, anything. Think of it as the thing that you are going to send to the user or to the client, this thing that you're going to show. And then finally we have the controller, which is, the idea of the controller is basically that you have a set of endpoints. That's usually how it works. You have, so, you know, when you go to a URL such as, let's say, slash, you know, localhost 3000 or 5000, or, you know, if you have it hosted, so your DNS host name slash products slash some ID of some sort. That's you know, when you actually access different endpoints on your server, that's where the controller comes in. The controller is the code that is responsible for handling the incoming request and mapping, or rather getting that mapped into, well, that's not really true. The routing system, which is usually something you get from a library, is responsible for checking what the URL is and mapping it into a controller. The controller is the part that basically, it's the glue function that you use in order to decide what's going to happen in the request. So let's say that somebody goes to your root, the root of your server, then what usually happens is that, all right, that controller function is going to get the request, see that, all right, it's a request to the root, let's get the index HTML file, or, you know, the landing page, get all the data I need to put on that page and send it off to the user. If in this case, say that there was a post to /products in order for somebody to be able to add products to our system, we would have a controller function that would take that request, go and talk and get the model, and say to the model basically, oh yeah, I have a post request here for adding a product to the database. Can you do that for me? And then the model would be responsible for saving that data. That's usually how this MVC structure works. Now, this is a very simple example of how it works, and there's so many different flavors of how you would use MVC, but I urge you to take a look at this, because it is a hard requirement. Trust me, you will not be considered a professional, or whether in the web world, this is a hard requirement. There are other ways you can build things, but this is very important. So have a look at that. And yeah, I hope you have a great day.